presentation is on depletion of groundwater along with 3 plants that have changed history and society for humans. And so starting with depletion of groundwater, we'll define what groundwater or depletion of groundwater is, which is the long-term decline of levels in the soil. It's measured in feet, and basically how it happens is the pumping of groundwater by humans, deforestation, and harmful agriculture techniques such as tilling. The pumping of groundwater and deforestation are the 2 largest factors that play into depletion of groundwater. Negative effects of groundwater depletion: wells that rely on this groundwater start to dry up and no longer become accessible to farmers or small villages that use them as their main water supply. Rivers and lake water levels begin to lower along with increasing cost of pumping, and effects are worldwide. It also decreases the level of purity of water and makes it more contaminated.
Alright, so this is the Ogallala Aquifer, which is the biggest aquifer in the world. As you can see, it runs from pretty much South Dakota all the way down to Texas, and it also runs from basically central Kansas / our part of Nebraska all the way over to Wyoming. But once upon a time it used to run a lot bigger. It used to run from mountain range to mountain range, but now it's only really that. So quite frankly, we've lost a lot of water. And pretty much with this aquifer, its biggest significance is that it gives so much water to the United States, internal United States, that if it goes, we basically go with it, because that's where we get, what does it say, 30%? 30% of all of our water in the United States. And it started to kind of fall off and get lower, more depleted. The level started to drop, kind of, the amount of water in it started to drop right when we started pumping gas in the 40s. And quite frankly, it's been going on a consistent, steady slope, and we need to bring it back up if we're going to actually, like, you know, continue on, which I don't know, I kind of want to, but
And then in some areas the water has lowered by about 100 to 200 feet. So this map is from 1997. And so some of these areas of darker concentration where it shows deeper waters have actually lessened since that time.
Okay, so things we can do to kind of slow this down starts off with plants being used as filters. So one of the biggest problems with groundwater depletion is that it's more so we're polluting our own water. We're putting, for lack of a better term, we're putting crap into our water, and with all this crap getting in our water, we're losing our amount of good fresh water. We need to filter it. And so what I mean when I say crap, I mean things like fertilizers and stuff like that, waste, polluted. We're basically polluting ourselves. And the way plants help with this is the same principle that wetlands serve and marshes serve, and things like the Everglades in Florida, and deltas even on the coast of California. Pretty much the whole purpose that they serve is to filter out crap before it gets back into good water sources. So like a delta in California, when crap gets into the water stream going into the oceans, the delta is right there between the rivers going out into the oceans and the actual oceans, and all the crap gets into the delta, and the plants kind of hold it and absorb it and eat it. And that's kind of how plants serve a purpose there, with taking all of the crap out of the good water. Plants also absorb the water. Plants also absorb the water before it can leak. So we lose a lot of groundwater when it can't, like, when the ground doesn't serve as a bowl. So basically, if there's a crack in the bowl or it starts overflowing, we lose it. Kind of the same principle as cereal. If you pour too much milk in, you start losing it. If there's a crack in the bottom of it, you don't get any at all. And pretty much the way that we kind of fix this is plants serve as a spoon. For example, let's take the tropical rainforest, so the Amazon rainforest, let's go there. Pretty much, we remember from class how all of those plants in that forest basically absorbed all of that water, and it basically caused rain to happen every single day for about 15-20 minutes because of so much precipitation in the air that they were letting loose. And so if we don't need it on that drastic of a scale to have every plant in the world across water beds and water tables and aquifers and everything, but it definitely does help, because that way we're not losing as much water and the bowl doesn't ever have a crack. Basically, the plants are serving as that spoon, keeping the water where it's supposed to be. Now, they also hold the ground in place. That way we don't get sediment buildup across riverbeds and stuff like that, because sediment buildup stops rivers from flowing. Sediment buildup basically the ground takes the place of where the water's supposed to be. And that's one of the bigger issues, because if ground is where water's supposed to be, where's water? Nowhere. Problem. The other thing, like I was saying earlier with our pollutants and plants using that, there's another strategy, and it's actually how we fix oil spills. It's called bioremediation. And pretty much what we do is we drop a bunch of algae in the water where some sort of pollutant is taken over the water, and basically what we do is once we dump the algae or the bacteria, it cleans up everything and then dies. And that's it. pretty straightforward, pretty simple. And it's one of the best ways to clean up big pollutant things like oil spills and stuff like that. It's how we get crap out of there, other than plants stopping the crap from getting there in the first place.
All right, and that concludes our portion on groundwater depletion, and starting next we will be looking at plants that have changed society and human history, starting with the prickly pear.
All right, and so the prickly pear, over 1,500 different types of prickly pear. It's cacti, pretty much, more commonly known as opuntia. 1,500 different species. The leaves are actually spines, so all of this, the pokey stuff, spines. They're kind of wide, fleshy, big, thick stems, and that's their plant body rather than like a big old tree stump or something like that. It's just those big, thick kind of stem type of deals. And then if you can kind of picture it with me, there's on normal cactuses, they can grow those little flowers. They're very bright flowers, like generally pinkish. And those flowers have many different stamens, petals, and sepals. And that's how they grow their fruits fast, I guess. And then in terms of growing their fruits fast, they have their, lesser ovary, so their smaller one, the non-dominant ovary basically becomes the fruit, the berry, and pretty much with it, the other one, the right one, becomes the seed that ends up going on and turning into the next prickly pear, while the smaller one becomes the fruit, if you kind of make sense with that with me. The smaller one is the fruit, the bigger one is the next plant. And so then, when it comes to its history, it started off in the Americas, ranging from South America all the way up to North America. But originally, it was kind of more in South America and dry tropical regions, kind of in the deserty areas of South America. And it started off there, but when there was a land bridge, it moved its way up to North America, and pretty much the way it moved up to North America and why there's prickly pear in like the Southwest area and the deserts in Arizona's, New Mexico, places like that, the reason it's there is pretty much because when the land bridge got built, or formed I should say, not built, but when it got formed, pretty much what had happened was animals that were eating the berries and eating the seeds and eating the fruits and digesting it They basically walked all the way up, and then just kind of they left it behind is the good way to put it. And so they left it behind for it to grow in those other regions where it's traditionally supposed to grow, in those dry subtropical areas. And then it almost at one point completely invaded Australia. And that's because Australia is like the perfect climate for it, the perfect biome, perfect region, where the interior of Australia is just desert. And it almost completely invaded. However, there was an answer by dropping these moths. I think I had a nope, not on this one, other one. But these moths, called the cactus moth, were basically the only thing that could take out the prickly pear. And since the prickly pear pretty much invaded all of interior Australia, they're like, oh, that's a problem. And so what they did was they dropped all these moths to take it out, and I think it was like, I think they called it something like the Green Death, the Green Plague, something along those lines, because prickly pear was everywhere. You couldn't cross the street without seeing at least 50 of them between your house and the neighbor right across the street, without seeing 50 of them on the sidewalks. And some of them even made it like towards the street. Like, it was bad. And the only way around it was to get these moths, and then the moths got brought in to take out all the prickly pear. And then the problem that occurred after that is, after they took out all the prickly pear, what was going to take out the moths? And then next, more of a history on it. So kind of with the, you could technically throw that, like Green Plague, Green Death, whatever it was, you could throw that in with history as well. But that's more of an abbreviated history that only lasted for a short amount of time. I mean, still history, good history. But pretty much when it comes to the prickly pear, the fruit is edible to us. Like, we can eat it. And that's kind of where it got its significance, where it got its importance initially in other cultures. It got called prickly pear because it looks like a pear with spines on it, and that's pretty much it. It doesn't taste like a pear. It's been used as food, dye, leather, fuel, bioplastic, which is better than normal plastic because it's derived from like living stuff, so it's good. Well, better, not good, but better. And then it's also been used as medicine before, like a type of medicine. And as you can see here, right here on this flag, is actually the Mexican flag, and it is actually Opuntia, and that comes from a story in Mexican culture about how one of their gods basically gave the Mexican people Opuntia. I'm abbreviating here. Basically gave the Mexican people Opuntia in the form of prickly pear, and that was how they carried on, and it basically became an important sign of like their culture and how they lived and how their civilization started up and kept going.
All right. Our next one is wild mustard. Its scientific name is Sinapis erivenis, and it is from the Cruciferae family. It is a dicot plant and grows annually and is herbaceous. The leaves are lobed and have serrated edges, as you can kind of make out in this image here. The leaves are larger at the base of the plant opposed to higher up, where they form more spindle-like, smaller bodies. And the only way to grow wild mustard is by propagating the seeds. They don't grow from stems or roots. And then a few different vegetables and edible plants that we get from wild mustard are Brussels sprouts, cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, and several others. The history and location of it, it grows in cool, temperate climates, so northern hemisphere, through Canada, the USA, and most of northern Europe, with some of these more watery places such as England, Sweden, Norway, excluded from that. They were used and cultivated by the Greeks and Romans, and that's actually where they are native to, is that Mediterranean area, and they spread worldwide from there. North America began cultivation in the 1900s, and it grows best in the temperate climates of the north. And then primarily used as a food source, but Nepal does use the mustard seeds to make medications as well. And Nepal is the world leader in mustard production. As you can see by this map, their line goes all the way through versus Canada, Russia, and some of these other countries just having more along the lines of 25,000 to 50,000 per year. The impacts on human civilization is that it feeds billions worldwide every year. They're able to be grown in temperate climates with low moisture availability, which is ideal for places such as Nepal, Russia, Canada, where they have very dry, colder climates. And it's also eaten raw or processed. It can be made into a flour-like substance, a powder, or just the individual plants that have been developed from it, such as, like I said, the Brussels sprouts, broccoli, cauliflower, can be eaten raw or processed. It can also be used to make oil, and in a evolving world where we're trying to rely less on natural gases, natural resources such as oil and coal, we're trying to find more biofuel crops, and so wild mustard is high on that list for producing biofuels. And as I said, a few cultures do use it for medicine, which includes diabetes, cardiovascular, and neuropathic diseases. And our last plant is the cassava root. Its scientific name is the Manihot esculenta. It is a monocot plant and is a perennial, and they grow in these woody shrubs. And so you have the roots down here. The stem is very short and stems out. The leaves have a palmate ventation, and this one can be propagated from seeds or the stem, and so that's actually part of the farming process for them as they're going about chopping off the foliage and the stems so that they can harvest the roots. They're allowing the stems to stay in the field so that they can be used again for replanting next year's crop. Cassava is a tuberous root plant, and the roots contain cyanide, which means they need to be cooked before eaten, otherwise they are poisonous and will be deadly. The history of them: they grow in tropical and subtropical climates, and so they started off in Latin America. It's believed that the Mayans cultivated them, and eventually the Portuguese brought them to Africa in the 1500s. Due to the climate that these plants prefer, they were able to grow widely throughout Africa and became a staple farmer plant, and they're now used worldwide and produce a few different types of foods as well as biofuels and medicines. They're rich in carbohydrates and feed millions year-round, and they're able to survive drought and famine, which means that they're able to grow in areas of the world that have less readily available water. So especially as we're moving forward with the depletion of groundwater, if we don't figure out that problem, then the cassava root is going to be very helpful to us in the future, since it's going to be able to survive in situations with lower water. It is used as a food eaten directly or processed. As I said, the roots do contain cyanide, so it does need to be cooked. It can't be eaten raw. And then the leaves specifically are what's used to make biofuel. Again, as the farmers are going through chopping those out, they are leaving the leaves off to one side and then letting the stems out through the field so that they can propagate the next crop. They're also used to make alcohol and paper. And that is our presentation. Thank you.